and she pondered what sort of greeting this might be. What is the difference between a response and a reaction? That's something that I pondered in my heart one Sunday afternoon in September, when one of my many Benedictine human formators in the seminary, charitably, yet bluntly, as they are known to do, corrected me after one of my less admirable moments as a deacon and as a seminarian. You see, in the seminary, for those of you who do not know, your deacon year is a year when more is expected of you, asked of you. Leadership is what is expected. This year I was asked to assume a position that included leading 20-some other seminarians, some of which included a few of my fellow deacons. And like most positions, I was forced to come up with certain guidelines, agendas, and being the perfectionist that I am, put a lot of work into it, put a lot of pride into it. And then one evening when my group came together for a meeting, one of my fellow deacons, a brother, a friend of mine, openly made a joke about my work, and it evoked a certain sense of laughter within the group. And it was at my expense. And I sensed that he was challenging my authority. I saw red. I was upset. And without skipping a beat, I quickly shut him down. With a stern voice and with a look that could kill, I uttered a single sentence, and which basically boiled down to, I'm in charge and you are not. I must have said that sentence at least 2 or 3 separate times. And I got the result I wanted. He backed down. He never insulted me again. I felt justified and good about taking control, being a man's man. That was until I had a meeting with my human formator who saw it all happen. Because in that meeting I was corrected, and I heard him saying something that will stick with me forever, and I hope it sticks with me forever. He said, you reacted to a situation when I wish you would have responded. I think this scenario is something many of us may find familiar in our own experiences, whether we're part of a community residing here in the monastery, studying in a seminary, or maybe we're only visiting today, but still experience this tension elsewhere. We all experience interactions with others that involve a risk of a bitter exchange, conversations that flow like milk and honey in one moment, but then breaks down in the next. And we're very tempted to allow our desire to protect the innermost part of ourselves, our ego, force us go into an attack. It's instinctual. It's almost animalistic. And when you poke an animal, when you scare an animal, they'll react. Claws come out. Teeth are shown. They're in a defensive mode to protect themselves from an outside danger. And this is something we as humans, at our very basic level, our very base level, limit ourselves to. We limit ourselves to that animalistic reaction. And this is something we inherited as humans from our first parents. We see in our first reading Adam's immediate reaction when God calls him out among the trees in the garden to say, where are you? Who said you were naked? Did you eat of the tree which I have forbidden you to eat? And he replies, she made me do it. The one who earlier I said was bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, it's her fault. To which God replies to her and asks, what happened? And she looks at God and says, the serpent tricked me. It's his fault. The buck keeps getting passed down the line, and the stain of that original sin, that disobedience, that pride, it multiplies. It's disseminated across generations. All of salvation history is littered and riddled with moments that reveal how man's fallen state is marked by that instinctual urge to protect the self, to protect the ego, to allow pride to set in when humility is what our Lord wants. And as the expression goes, it's as old as sin. It's the standard for our species for a long time. Until one day, another day, in a place that isn't even mentioned in the Old Testament, a dusty backwater town in Galilee, Nazareth, where the archangel Gabriel, sent from our Lord, comes down to the very simple and humble servant. A woman A woman who was not tainted by the original sin of our first parents. A woman from since the time of her conception knew no sins. A woman who was preserved from that original blemish, from that original scourge, from that original reaction that caused all of humanity to suffer and to lose its full attention and connection with God. And the archangel says, "Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you." And it was through the merits of her not yet incarnate Son, by a singular grace granted by God, she was able to take into her heart the words of the angel that imparted upon her and humbly ponder them. In her sheer humility, she pondered them. But what was she doing before all of this? What did that preservation from original sin empower her to do before she assented to the great yes, that great Magnificat that we all love? She was waiting. She was watching. Standing watch, as our Lord Christ implored us to do in our readings from last Sunday. She lived in hopeful anticipation. And in that anticipation, she was free to live a life unconcerned with the selfish thoughts of herself. She lived in freedom. It was this freedom that allows our Blessed Mother to respond, not to react. Combining humility and obedience, she responds perfectly to God's call. "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. May it be done to me according to your word." My brothers and sisters, that sanctifying grace that Mary received at the moment of her immaculate conception within her mother's womb is granted to us too. Sanctifying grace is granted to us by that same most generous benefactor, our Lord, through the sacraments. By the dignity of our baptism, our frequent reception of the sacraments, reconciliation, Eucharist, we have the capability to respond as Our Lady does, and we're invited to do so over and over again. That same sanctifying grace that allowed Mary to wait in awareness, anticipate with docility, and respond. No space or time can thwart the love that God has for his people. It's only our denial and our refusal to receive that gift and to respond with honest humility that separates us from him. And today we live in a world where this happens all way too often. When the most basic human rights are ignored for the sake of protecting the ego, when world leaders naturally react to attacks on them and attacks on others, when people who walk on the side of the street have no concern for the poor, no concern for those who are suffering, only concerning themselves with protecting themselves and loving themselves and giving themselves what they feel is their due. Imagine, my friends, what the world would look like if we were able to take this call of communion, this call of love, this call of sanctifying grace, and respond, not react. Maybe, just maybe, one day we can look to our Lord and say, "Behold, I am the handmaid, I am the servant. Be it done to me according to your word."